Here's what comes right out of the headline news that so many people miss. It's hiding in plain sight. So Arab Spring breaks out and all of this collapse starts happening. Civil war in Syria is just horrific. One of the things that happened in Syria was when ISIS was really thick and heavy and really heavy-handed in that area and controlling of that area. They were destroying as many ancient artifacts as they could that they felt was completely opposed to their Islamic worldview. One of the things that they destroyed was a temple of Baal built by the Romans during the Roman Empire. It used to be a huge tourist attraction. This was in Palmyra, Syria. Now, the archway left for a while, but then eventually they destroyed that too. So what happened is this group of people, and I can't remember the name of the group, but again, this was carried in mainstream media because it was announced they were going to first bring it to New York City. But this group of people, kind of under the guise of archaeology and historical preservation. And I say under the guise, I think some of them were very sincere about that. In other words, they were just infuriated by these ancient relics of tourist attraction and ancient history that were just summarily destroyed. Okay. And so they wanted to try to recreate them. Well, recreating the whole temple of Baal was a little too big of a project, but they did recreate what's called the Palmyra Arch, the Baal archway. Now, what that represents, by the way, the replication is 11 tons and it's 5 stories tall. Wow. And it's to scale. Yeah, it's not just some little 8-foot arch that you walk through. No, this is a huge dedication to Baal worship. And the way the thing was originally structured is that this archway represented literally a portal entering from one dimension to the next. I know people say, well, that sounds like science fiction. Well, actually, the study of quantum mechanics and all of that, I mean, we understand that there are multiple dimensions of reality. The Word of God speaks of that as well. Before you could approach the temple, you had to go through there. So everything God does, Satan perverts and copycats and mimics and counterfeits. So the Temple Mount, you know, there was the outer courts and the inner sanctuary, then the Holy of Holies, and the priest had to prepare themselves as they came, and then only one priest could go into the Holy of Holies. Well, see, Satan kind of replicates all of that. So he's got the archway where you have to come through that first. 2016, it was announced. It was in early 2016, I think January, February, something like that. New York Times, headline article. Other world publications, national publications, Washington Post. The Temple of Baal is coming to Times Square. That was the headline, something very close to that. I'm paraphrasing. The Temple of Baal will be erected in Times Square. We want to take this on a world tour to show the world this relic that we've had to recreate to show you what, you know, nasty ISIS did. And then their theme was, because this represents freedom. If you go back into the ancient historical writings of the worship of Baal, that's right. That's exactly what it represents. This represents freedom. And then they said it represents victory. And then they said this will show that ISIS can never win. An arch to Baal is representative that ISIS cannot win? That didn't even make sense. No. But what they did was they couldn't get it into New York City. And by the way, it wasn't the Temple of Baal, but that's what the headline said, and that's what everybody reacted to. It was this arch. Well, that headline, you know, really infuriated a lot of people. There was an outcry. I mean, the whole evangelical Christian community said, what? And then even people in New York City, even if they weren't believers or, you know, Bible-believing Christians, they were kind of freaked out by that. So there was such an outcry that they backed off. What they did, just a few months later, they opened with this production in London, the #1 economic capital of the European Union then, before Brexit started. But here's where the thing gets creepy. They opened it. They aligned the opening and the unveiling of it to correspond with Beltane, B-E-L-T-A-N-E. That literally translates to the fires of Baal. And it is an internationally recognized celebration of Baal. It's their holidays. And the fires of Baal, Beltane, that's what the celebration is called. That goes back to the fires of infant sacrifice in the Old Testament. And so here it is. There's the first unveiling. It's going to go a couple of other places, too, on this world tour. And every place is a globalist, economic, financial power center, which is what Baal worship is all about. Power and wealth and freedom. And that's what they're declaring. So they move it from London. Then just some weeks later, a month and a half later, they take it to New York. Now it's not called the Temple of Baal. It's not even called the Arch of Baal. It's called the Palmyra Arch. And it's a historical display, but they display it now in a park right across from City Hall in New York, which is just a block or two away from Ground Zero, and not too far from the United Nations. So it's right there. And the mayor comes out, makes a big speech about how this represents freedom. And they never say, freedom from what? What are you talking about? But again, the historical understanding of the worship of Baal, that was the theme. Freedom from Yahweh, freedom from the Lord, freedom from His regulations, freedom from His law, freedom from His word. So they unveil it in New York. Well, by the time it gets to New York, and people like us are watching this, and I was not the only one to see this. I was one that was outspoken early on, but there were many others too. They first saw it in London, opened on Beltane, and they said, you purposely time it for Beltane, then you bring it to New York, this economic engine, the center of world power, the United Nations, put it just a few blocks from ground zero, you put it right in front of City Hall. Now it's a little more in your face. The next place they took was to Dubai. They coordinated it with the opening of the World Governance Summit. 4,000 people from 130 nations of the world, world leaders were there. Elon Musk, speaker, and a bunch of globalists. They were all the speakers. Barack Obama was there, a part of helping to get the World Governance Council started. One of their themes in the headline news was what we're trying to do is to bring all the nations of the world together under one umbrella. And I'm going to put quotes, I'm quoting. That's what this is about. Bringing all the nations of the world together under one umbrella. Well,
that's scary.
Well, that's the Antichrist spirit. That's the globalist spirit. Okay, so now follow the trail because it goes one more place. Then, a few months later, it goes to Florence, Italy at the opening of the G7 conference. Another kind of United Nations, many people believe a globalist-minded institution. And they opened the G7 conference with the ceremony to the Arch. So, you know, I know people listening to this can say, well, maybe you're just reading too much into it. Maybe I am, but I don't think so. Because I know what the scriptures say about the last days. And the scriptures don't use these words, but this is what it says. The hiding in plain sight of the demonic outpouring. There will be, Paul says, the Spirit clearly says in the last days that there will be a demonic, and he doesn't use the word outpouring, but that's what it means, that will lead to apostasy and will also lead to seducing spirits that will just kind of sweep and capture the world, will seduce the world. And that's where we are, guys. And so this was a hiding in plain sight. Baal takes a victory tour, and he's just saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And those four places kind of represent, you know, the power control structures of the world. And it was all done under the guise of, well, we're just presenting a historical artifact. Yeah, but why in those places? And why does there have to be a ceremony attached to the opening of globalist agenda things? Why did it have to be on Beltane, the celebrating of killing your children in the fire?